Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland, your favorite show in existence.
I was going to say that needs no qualifier, but that was a good one. Yeah.
Radio Wasteland is a show about conspiracies, paranormal, and basically things that go bump in the night that people don't want to talk about. I'm your host, Chauncey Haworth, and this is my co-host, Sean.
Hello.
How's your week going?
Not bad. It's been an eventful week, certainly, in terms of the world.
In terms of the world?
The news and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, Golden State killing.
Case in point, yes, I was just about to say, we in California here have received closure on something that actually I'm too young to really know it was even a thing. Like, I wasn't alive, so I barely knew that he existed.
I imagined you to be a fan of serial killers and stuff like that.
I am, but I'm not particularly knowledgeable about them, to be honest.
I see.
I mean, they're interesting, but the serial killer stories, I can never retain that stuff. I can never remember the names or the dates or,
right. Especially maybe one that didn't have a name connected to it.
Exactly. I remember some details about the Zodiac Killer, because that's a weird one, right?
Right.
It's especially odd, but...
And then specifically with the Golden State Killer, he was several other killers that they figured out was all one guy.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So...
The way they caught him, though, was certainly, I don't know, it's unexpected, to say the least. At least to me, not knowing about any of this genealogy stuff and exactly, like how it worked. If I had committed those crimes and gotten caught, I would have been like, oh, come on, that's a thing,
Right. Yeah, totally.
I covered my tracks so totally, and then someone finds me because of, this...
You feel a little cheated.
BS extrapolation from science magic. It's like, that's just not fair. That's not playing fair.
Yeah. And then they snuck around and followed him around and got something and got his DNA off of it.
Exactly. Like out of his trash or something, right?
Yeah, it's, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's
Brave New World stuff.
Yeah, it definitely, in the conspiracy world...
I don't mind when you're catching serial killers with technology. Right, that's cool. But
everything nowadays is a slippery slope.
Sure.
There's a lot of slippery slopes going on here. Mm-hmm. And, the right would argue that basically through government control, we're slipping towards control, and the left would argue that... by not doing these things and by corporate control, we're allowing corporations to do this. So really, you really have to just decide, do you want the government to rule your life or do you want corporations?
Right, yeah. I find that to be a big difference between conservatives and liberals oftentimes is, just where they have the blind spots in terms of who they trust. Right. Naively.
When really, ultimately, you should probably not trust any of them.
Yeah, but it's hard to boil that down into a political philosophy, apart from I shall live in my bunker in the woods in Montana.
So who would you rather have control your life, the government or corporations?
Depends on the corporation.
I guess so.
Right? I mean,
right.
Benevolent governments are great, benevolent corporations are great. In principle, you can vote for governments, right? Corporations, if they're monopolies, there's not a lot you can do about that.
Well, I was talking to somebody about how I'd like to buy a piece of land and get a...
But that's only in principle. I know, obviously, it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
It rarely does, really.
Well, I was talking to somebody about how I'd like to get a piece of land and get a tiny home on it, and then we'd build another tiny home for our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then a friend was saying, oh, well, I want to do that too, and we're just all, well, maybe she could get a tiny home there. And then somebody's like telling me, like, what are you making, some kind of hippie commune? And I'm just all, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I'm down with some hippie commune.
If it goes that way, we'll
and
see
they're
how
just
we feel.
all, and you really think that would work? Is what they say to me. And my answer is the same answer for benevolent government or a benevolent corporation, and that is, yeah, it'll work for one generation.
Right.
You just can't bank on what the next generation's going to do. But
exactly.
I mean, if I have a friend of mine move into my tiny home who I've known since they were 15, chances are we're going to be all right.
Yeah.
It's the next generation where that stuff is likely going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Because young people are crazy.
Yeah.
We were all young people at one point, maybe a young person now. Sean.
Okay.
You are much more apt to make crazy, life-altering decisions that will affect the people around you, and you wouldn't even realize that it was affecting the people around you until later.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's just the nature of being young.
Sure.
So it worked fine until the next generation came along. And people are just all, we're going to throw this all up in the air and watch it burn because we want to, I mean, maybe that's going to come around. I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard to make people-proof rules. You set up the rules, but no one follows the rules.
Right. Speaking of my hippie commune that I want to start,
sure.
I've been trying to learn to grow plants in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to counseling because I can't stop. And I see no end in sight to anything. I have no short-term goals. My only goals that exist are well beyond my own lifetime. And I'm just insane about them.
Well beyond. Are you planning some kind of elaborate after-death conspiracy with your will and, a bunch of money hidden in bank accounts all around the world that sends people on this globe-trotting adventure?
If I have money, yeah. If I have money by then. I don't have it now, but yeah, totally.
Well, you said well after my death, and it's what could that possibly be if not, some sort of...
just business stuff and, family stuff and getting stuff done and, just all sorts of just ridiculous things.
Right, okay. I thought you meant globetrotting shenanigans, but okay, go ahead.
No, so I plant a garden to try to give myself, these sorts of short-term goals.
Sure.
And I find myself going out there every day and just staring at this garden going why isn't it growing quicker? What's going on? And I'm totally disturbed by how slow my garden moves. And I'm all enamored with my mint plants now because, what the hell are you going to do with mint, right? I can have a mojito and lamb mint ball party, but it's but they grow fast, so it's every day I go out there and I'm all, yeah, the mint's doing good, but my poor cilantro plant is literally one stalk coming up with a leaf off of it. And my wife's just all, I don't know if it's going to make it.
So you'll be good on herbs in the post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
Your food will be heavily seasoned.
Yeah, somebody else made that joke about how it's going to be a flavorful apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we got a guest tonight who will enjoy the fact that all my plants, my wife has insisted, are organic. Matthew Landman is our guest tonight, and we're going to be talking about geoengineering.
Indeed.
Now, this is one of those topics that personally I feel is going on, but to what degree is the question.
Sure.
We know this is going on to some degree. We know that cloud seeding has happened. We know that some of these things are happening, but to what degree is this going on? He's going to tell us.
I'm excited.
Or at least he's going to give us some clues. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back from Matthew Landman. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Matthew Landman. Matthew, we got you there with us?
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being on. So I was reading about you, and your story is really interesting and one that's happening more and more about going from sort of a corporate life to a bit more of a homesteady life. How'd you get started in what led you to geoengineering and chemtrails and all this research?
Well, and thank you so much for asking, because I do like to try to convey to people that I'm just a normal guy turned activist. I grew up in Virginia, and then after all these different walks of life and many careers, I ended up in Northern California going back to school. Just over the mountains from you all, I went over to Humboldt State University and got my master's in business administration with a focus in strategic sustainability. Graduated top of my class, and while I was there, I studied film, which enabled me to create the documentary Frankenskies. But after I graduated with the MBA, I ended up just doing what I was always doing, which was working in a cubicle. I worked as a finance analyst, and then I ended up working for Internews, this nonprofit that has an office in Arcata over there. And then finally I got this opportunity to work on an organic farm. And I took it, and it was amazing. It changed my life forever. I was working with squash and potato and corn and all these different fruits and vegetables, primarily winter squash, a dozen varieties, and potatoes. And I literally had never known, after 35 years of life and all this education and what have you, I didn't know that potatoes grew potatoes. So that alone made me kind of wake up to this indoctrination that we call the educational system. And from there, I learned a lot about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which is all you really need to grow crops. And there on the farm, let's see, when was it? It was around 2015 at the time, maybe 2014, and we were really deep into this drought. Okay, we were like 4 or 5 years into this drought that we've been witnessing in California, and it was harvest season. It was there was squash and pumpkin in the field, and we were supposed to go out and harvest in early October, and the storm was coming. So we were out there harvesting in what I thought was going to be the rain because of this 100% chance of rain over the next week. But the storm clouds came rolling off the ocean, and along with them is what I witnessed was a statistically significant uptick in air traffic. Because I've studied the stock market and finance and all this stuff, I'm a numbers guy. And what I witnessed was way more jets than I'd ever seen out there on that farm on the edge of the storm. So anybody who has witnessed it in Redding and in California or nationwide, around the world, you first start to see it on the edge of weather patterns, because that's when a lot of planes show up, especially in the past. Nowadays, it's becoming so much more prolific that you've got drones seeding and spraying different stuff all the time. But at that time, there was sparse air traffic. There was sparse air traffic every single day, but on this particular day, on the edge of this big dark storm system, these planes showed up, a dozen planes, and there was never a dozen planes in the sky when I was out there farming. And so not only were these planes irregular, this irregular pattern of appearance, this statistical anomaly, that they also had these persistent linear cirrus cloud formations coming out of the back, these lines coming out of the back. And as those lines bellowed into a white milky haze, the storm came and it didn't drop any rain. And that was my little aha moment. So I started looking at the sky more and asking questions, and come to find out there was weather modification going on right over my head, and drought causation, like purposeful drought causation right over my head. And so I ended up devoting my life to it and making the film and running with it, because not very many people knew what was going on.
So you feel in that situation that they were causing drought, not trying to bring the weather to you?
Well, that was exactly what seemed to be going on, because the storm didn't drop any rain, and we were really desperate for rain at the time. I had amphibious salamanders and frogs coming out from underneath my house expecting this rain, and we hadn't had rain in a few years, and it was very abnormal. So the planes that came, after doing research, I learned that if you spray aluminum, you can dissipate storms, and if you spray silver, you can make it rain. But yeah, it seemed like the planes, they were spraying something to make the storm cloud not drop the rain on the farm and on California where I was at.
So I watched your movie today, Frankenskies, and
oh, thanks.
And in the movie, it was really sort of talking about the way they move weather is by dropping certain, not chemicals, but elements, I guess, that basically cause, pressure in order to really bend the jet stream. Is that, I'm not sure if I'm explaining that very well.
No, yeah, you're right there. So it's a little complicated, because all this stuff, we don't learn this growing up. Yeah. It's not in our formal educational system. But there was a guy, Nikola Tesla. And Tesla, he discovered how to use frequency, and his research was adopted and picked up by the U.S. Air Force and the military and the U.S. government. And one of the first research centers was this thing called HAARP, HAARP, which stands for the Highly Active Auroral Research Program, which started off in Alaska. Now we've got these same, what they're called ionospheric heaters. We've got these same ionospheric heater stations. They're stationed all over the United States, and they're even called NEXRAD stations. But what they do is they utilize frequency. So when they first set it up in Alaska and had this antenna array in Alaska, they had this football field size antenna array, this football field of antennas. And what they would do is have the antennas focus on a focal point in the atmosphere and then direct frequency at that focal point in the atmosphere to superheat that point in the atmosphere. Then they learned if they sprayed aerosolized metallics, such as aluminum, barium, strontium, these things that are in the patents that are showing up in the rainwater and in our blood and hair analysis and what have you, and even in the lichen and what have you. There's a lot of research coming out of that area, Reading, that has shown the corollaries to the different chemicals used. They aerosolize, for instance, aluminum, spray it in the stratosphere or the troposphere, and in this instance, they call it an ionospheric heater because when they first started testing this layer of the atmosphere, they would superheat the ionosphere. But after they lay out with the planes, with these sprayers out of tanks, they spray aerosolized oxidized aluminum. And as it bellows out into these fake clouds that look very abnormal, especially if you've been looking at the sky for as long as I have, I'm 37 now, the HAARP frequency array picks a focal point in that fake cloud and superheats it so that aerosolized metallics, those help with the heating of the atmosphere. So then you superheat the atmosphere, then the heat below it rises because hot air rises, and you can create this high pressure. So when you see on the Weather Channel, especially back in the day when we watched TV, we didn't have the internet, there's these H's and L's on the weather, right? Those are high and low pressure. It basically means sinking air or rising air. And rising air is high pressure, and if you can create rising air by superheating the atmosphere, you can create an upward draft and you can steer jet streams. So, for instance, the California drought, once they perfected this technology, they could spray mass amounts of these aerosolized metallics over the coast of California. Okay, and then they pick these certain points in this plume, and they superheat it and they keep doing it. They keep spraying and keep superheating it, and they create this high-pressure bubble over the coast of California. So then when you get this traditional jet stream that comes off of the Pacific, and usually we cross the entire transcontinental United States, and the mouth of this, what they call atmospheric river, this jet stream, the mouth of the atmospheric river goes from San Francisco all the way up to Seattle and beyond. And so generally, without this weather modification program intact, this jet stream would come off the Pacific, and it would bring the seasonal deluge of moisture from October to April. You all know about it. And the 2,000-year-old redwood trees, they surely know about it. So by creating this high-pressure bubble up the coast, the jet stream, as it comes west to east, it hits this bubble, and it steers up and around and loops up to Vancouver, Canada, up over the border, and comes down and completely misses California, causing drought. And then everyone asks why. Everyone wants to know who, what, why, where, when, before they can really sink their teeth into this thing. And the why is disruption of agriculture and consolidation of agriculture for big ag, so all these small family farms can get bought out and what have you, and maybe just to test their weather weapon. But yeah, it is ongoing, and once you do the research, you can see that it's quite evident.
Well, so I'm really kind of amazed about all this. When I watched the movie, I was really kind of amazed, because we're shown that this is so much fringe. But when I watched the show, there was so much there that seemed to be, straight out of the government's mouth, straight out of science's mouth about what we do and what we're capable of doing. We're coming up here on our first commercial break. You're listening to Matthew Landman here on Radio Wasteland, so don't miss out and come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Matthew Landman. In my research of all this stuff and looking into it, the media has really done a number on this topic because I have associated this with tinfoil hat nut jobs for quite some time. And I go into this and I do the research on it, and not only does a lot of it make sense, but a lot of these structures and everything that are causing this are actually there. A lot of the science is true. And I live by a lot of mantras in my life, and one of which is that at no point in human civilization has there ever been an invention that people decided, man, we're just not going to use that one. You know, something that we can somehow use to our advantage, and we decide as a civilization we're just not going to use it. And so here we are looking at a ton of science supporting this stuff, and, you know, are we using it? So I guess my question to you, Matthew, is how much of this is the government, I assume it's the government doing it, admitting that they're doing?
Well, it's funny because they pretty much admit to all of it, but it's all in their own terms. So by controlling the media and controlling the dialogue and controlling the narrative and controlling the way that people think about the subject, they've already controlled the way that we perceive it altogether. So first they started with the terminology, and the verbiage on it is so incredibly important because I too thought that it was a fringe topic, conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, whatever you want to call it. And when I started digging, at first I thought, oh, there's no way this could possibly be true. And trust me, I didn't want to devote my life to this. You know, I didn't want to lose my friends or anything like that. I was so worried what my peers would think, and my ego came in the way and said, are you crazy? This is crazy talk. But it's really real. And the verbiage tells the story. So you've got this word geoengineering, okay? And geoengineering, when I first started making my movie, I thought that I was just bringing people the information and saying, hey, please look at the sky. I promise if you start looking, something's really going on. I never thought that they would actually launch geoengineering as a supposed solution to global warming and climate change, and now we're in this full steam ahead programming where it's being normalized, where the social conditioning is normalizing. They launched 12 new clouds to the cloud atlas, and now they're saying that they need to spray the skies all the time to dim the sun to save us from global warming. It's a really dystopian, a crazy world we live in where my film shifted from please look at the sky to, hey, look, this is what the media and the powers that be are saying they want to do. So geoengineering has always been this term that seems like it's good and scientific, but it's this conspiratorial thing. Heaven forbid you use the word chemtrails. Chemtrails has always been demonized as this chemical trails from planes. It's the same. These are all synonyms I'm going to be using. Chemtrails, geoengineering, and these other words I'm going to go over. But if you use the word chemtrails, we've got controlled opposition, planted narrative speakers that are saying the word chemtrails but acting all crazy, but they're purposefully doing this, okay? And then the media is saying, oh, how could anyone think chemtrails are real? And they even did a study right before they launched that they needed geoengineering to save the planet. They did this mock scientific study that every single media outlet on Earth picked up. Every mainstream media. A lot of people don't know that the media has been completely consolidated. It's been consolidated down to 5 or 6 companies now, right? We used to have all these trusted news sources. They're all owned by the same families now, the same companies. And now they can control the entire narrative by framing the argument the way that they want. So it's this problem, reaction, solution that they've gotten so good at. So while we're over here bickering, is it geoengineering, is it chemtrails, what word should be used, which word is conspiratorial, and those are the search terms that I'm thinking I'm really smart when I'm using the geoengineering word, and if I look up chemtrails, I'm getting this fringe topic. All the while, you've got SRM, which is the solar radiation management. And this is like a program through our government, but if you don't know to look up solar radiation management and the Solar Radiation Management Governance Initiative, a governance body put in place to govern this solar radiation management project, which is the dimming of our sun to save us from global warming, if you don't know to look up these terms, you're just, in the dark with it, looking up the wrong verbiage and playing their game. Also, the CIA director, he nonchalantly references the Stratospheric Aerosol Injections Program, SAI, and all the while this SAI program is getting funded and all that stuff, and nobody's knowing even to look these words up. And the list goes on. You've got SPICE, the Stratospheric Particle Injection for climate engineering program, and this is ongoing. Through NASA, you've got the CARE program, Charged Aerosol Release Experiments. And this charged aerosol release experiment has a fleet of planes, a fleet of drones, and they make, quote, noctilucent clouds. They spray the skies with barium, aluminum, and strontium, utilizing these patents that go decades back. NASA has a budget of $52 million per day. That's their budget this year. Last year was $54 million per day. Okay? So they have a lot of money to throw around, and with that money, they use it to make these chemical clouds over our heads, right? You've also got the Tropospheric Aerosol Program, TAP, and this one is really fascinating. If you look up Tropospheric Aerosol Program, Department of Energy, you'll see a document that came out right in 2001, right before 9/11. So a lot of distraction was about to happen, and the Department of Energy funded this Tropospheric Aerosol Program where they did this persistent linear cirrus cloud formation grid pattern of different chemicals with their fleet that they already had established. The Department of Energy over Nashville, Tennessee, they put up drones and balloons and helicopters and land-based stations and spent millions of dollars in 2001. They had a budget that they lined out, and the document's 100 pages and it details everything. But in that document, they do not use the word chemtrails, contrails, or geoengineering. And they even spent $5 million in 2001 making sure that they didn't get caught. And so if you really start to sink your teeth into this and realize the Department of Energy has had a nefarious plan to eradicate solar as a renewable energy resource, so these dirty coal and oil energy companies, they got together and said, how are we going to block out the sun and make sure that solar energy doesn't proliferate? And then in doing so, they realized that they could use their ash from their coal-burning power plants, and that's what they use to spray the skies. So they refine this coal fly ash, and they can get their dirty nanoparticulate titanium, cadmium, aluminum, barium, strontium. All this stuff is all full circle, goes right back, if you just follow the money, goes right back to the Department of Energy, okay? So all the while, we've got all this stuff hidden right in plain sight. But when we're having their controlled argument, their controlled conversation, we're just spinning circles trying to figure out what's going on. Really quick, I'm hosting now my third global conference. I've hosted about a dozen events, but these global summits, I'm on the third annual one. Last year in Portland, I held one, and I had a U.S. Department of Agriculture scientist out of your region, and I believe he's in Reading, and he studied the lichen in Mount Shasta. And right when everyone started seeing these lines in the sky in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the soil was being impacted and the trees were being impacted, these lichen who get their nutrients out of lichen, or like these little moss animal, like it's like this fungus moss thing, lichen, it gets its nutrients from the air. So when it's pulling its nutrients out of the air, anything in the air is going to be shown in the lichen, and there's these exponential, statistically significant spikes in aluminum, barium, and strontium in these lichen. So the proof is in the pudding when you really start looking into it. And then we have U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rosalind Peterson, who just passed away, and she was identifying all this and spoke at the UN about this exact issue. But if you're playing their game and you're researching their terms and you're reading our quote-unquote trusted news sources, you're going to be subject to their conditioning and social engineering.
So we don't have long until our next commercial break. In fact, we just have 1 minute. But you're saying that the motivations behind this is purely money. They're not trying to necessarily save us. They're trying to save their profits and their financial standing.
Oh, it's quite nefarious. I think anything that says that they're doing it for our own good is just to trick us into believing that the carbon that we exhale is killing the planet and that we have to spray ourselves with chemicals to block out the sun to ruin the planet just because they say it's. You can either take truth as the authority or authority is the truth. A lot of people just listen to the authority and let that be the truth, but if you start resonating with the truth and you really realize what's going on, it all becomes self-evident.
All right, you're listening to Matthew Landman here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Matthew Landman, the creator of the movie Frankenskies, which I watched today, which was very interesting, very compelling. Matthew, how much of this is, well, I realize we don't have a straight answer on this, but how much of this do you think is warfare?
Well, that's a good question. So in my film Frankenskies, the most important aspect of the film is the first 30 minutes, how it goes through the chronological timeline. Okay, we start off in the 1930s and we show how this program evolved, and it was taken over by the U.S. Air Force and the military operations as a weather weapon. So that was how it evolved to where it is. Now that it's gotten into global dimming and dimming the sun for the entire planet, it's gotten really deep and sick and twisted. And when you realize the connection to weather derivatives and that there's an exchange where weather is traded and people who can predict the weather can make a lot of money, and you see the connection to Monsanto aluminum-resistant genetics, and you see that only Monsanto's seeds will grow in this dystopian future that they're creating, the picture starts to become very clear. But in Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was flooded. And you know what's really ironic is what they used to seed the clouds to flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam, dry ice, which is carbon dioxide. So they've been utilizing carbon dioxide to manipulate the weather for decades, for nearly a century. But then, as they use these different programs to mess with the climate, and they put carbon dioxide in our atmosphere at copious amounts, and then they superheat the atmosphere to steer weather patterns, and they create high-pressure bubbles and superheat the atmosphere. Then they say that the atmosphere is heating because of our emissions, and they have a problem that they've created, and then they blame us. And the reaction is fear, and the solution is, again, the problem that they initially hid from us, which is the spraying of our skies with nanoparticulate aluminum and barium and strontium and all these chemicals to supposedly save us from global warming. So after the United States sprayed different chemicals to make it deluge in the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam, the world saw that the United States had a weather weapon, and the countries of the world came together and signed an international treaty saying that they would not use weather as a weapon, but it could be used to experiment on your own people. So that's one thing that the U.S. took advantage of, and that's why they do so much of it here. But if you see the testimonies from the president of Iran, for instance, Ahmadinejad, he claims that the U.S. has created drought in his country, that they drain the clouds before they get there, that they steer jet streams so that he doesn't get rain and his country doesn't get rain, and they superheat the atmosphere above his country to create unbelievably high temperatures, record-breaking high temperatures for the entire planet in Iran. So they do use it as a weather weapon, as a war weapon. But it's not just that. The agenda is so multi-purpose. It crosses so many different categories that I would say that it's actually, at this day and age, it's a small fraction of it, unless you want to consider that the U.S. government is at war with us. Then I would say, yes, it is a weather weapon.
Well, it seems to me like, some of the more extreme ideas that are coming here, like, dimming the sun and stuff like that, it's like, I think the pushback that I would give is like, in this day and age where nobody in this world seems to be able to get along, this would need to be a global conspiracy of these people getting along for this purpose.
Well, if you're asking how many countries are involved, I don't think that the United States really cares. And as long as they can convince the world that this is what we need. So what happened was this Paris Agreement. Trump and the powers that be, whoever's behind Trump, they created this facade, this whole charade of Paris Climate Accord, and they say, well, we can't sign because we can't cut our emissions that much, and now we're left with we're left with making a different decision. And then they push in this geoengineering idea. So what happened last year is the establishment of this solar geoengineering governance regime, a self-proclaimed regime out of Chicago. It's a very small group of globalists who came together who claim that they have exclusive rights to saving the planet. Okay, this is a paper, you can look it up. Exclusive rights to saving the planet through geoengineering. And they claim that they have to act now because if they don't, everything's going to turn into chaos. So they've established this regime. They're launching this experiment in Tucson, Arizona. So I've moved. I was living in Vancouver, Canada with my family. I moved my family down to Arizona to bring attention to this experiment that's unfolding through the primary solar geoengineer by the name of David W. Keefe, and he's a Harvard professor of solar geoengineering. He's having this experiment unfold in Tucson where this high-tech balloon is spraying different chemicals in front of the sun. He's using variable sizes of nanoparticulate aluminum, imagine that, to see which chemicals work best to dim the sunlight. I just received word that the experiment is actually now ongoing, and so I'm hosting this conference May 12th. You can find out about it at stopgeoengineeringtucson.com. And at the conference, I've got speakers from all over the world that are coming together to bring light to this situation, which is this unfolding experiment. And then what they claim after this experiment goes well, if and when it goes well, which if you can see through the lies, you can see that this experiment is going to unfold and go well, and that they will say, hey, look, I think aluminum is the best thing to spray in front of the sun to block your sun to save you from global warming. Once that experiment is done, they want to launch what they're calling full-scale deployment. Okay, they're likening it to a volcanic eruption, which actually makes it sound a lot less harmless, but it's way worse than a volcanic eruption. But they're calling it a Mount Pinatubo effect. This is the term that's being run through the media to try to normalize and socially condition everybody to thinking that it's okay because volcanoes erupt and it's natural. Well, it's not natural. Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991 in the Philippines. All this sulfuric dust went up into the atmosphere, and it supposedly lowered the global mean temperature about 1 degree Celsius because so much sulfuric dust was blocking sunlight. They claim, these scientists, I mean, when I say they, it really turns people off. It's this Royal Society is what they're called. It's Bill Gates. Bill Gates is termed the sugar daddy of geoengineering. It's Bill Gates. It's David W. Keefe. It's just a handful of globalists who ultimately want to control the world. You know, if they get to dictate who gets sunlight, who does not, who gets blue skies, who does not, who gets rain, who does not, they control everything. Okay? I can't look at it from there. I'm not a psychopath or sociopath, you know, when people say why? It's greed. It's greed and power, and they're power hungry. You know, I don't know exactly why, but I do know it's very, very bad, and the future of humanity is at risk. So if they get to launch their quote-unquote full-scale deployment, they want to spray the skies with a massive fleet of drones everywhere all the time until the skies are white everywhere on Earth. Okay? And then once we get to that point, they say that's the point of no return, where they have to just continue to do it for decades to try to slow down the heating of the planet. But what they're going to do is create a greenhouse effect with this metal layer and actually create global warming. Okay? And then from that point, they'll say, oh, we need to spray more, it's not working, and then where are we at that point? You know, we've lost agriculture, trees are dying, we don't get any vitamin D, we're getting sprayed with chemicals, we got to figure out gas masks and chelation and get all these heavy metals out of our body. It's a very dystopian, sad future for our children and for the plants and animals on Earth, and it's not something I am willing to accept.
Well, yeah, it's a very scary, slippery slope. We're here at the end of the interview. I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell our audience where they can find out more about you.
Well, I have a Facebook page. I got 30,000 followers on there, but then I started seeing some really amazing, incredible censorship over the past few months. There's a serious crackdown on truth with the net neutrality on the Internet. If you haven't witnessed it, censorship is here. Okay, so please do follow me on Facebook, but I doubt you'll see any of my posts. Matt Landman is my name on there. And then please visit my websites. I have actualactivists.com. On actualactivists.com, I talk about a lot of different truths. I even have a daily truth where I post an update of some sort of daily truth about health, about geoengineering, about different agendas around the world that I find important that are for the like-minded. I've also got the website stopgeoengineeringtucson.com, and then my website for my film is frankenskiesthemovie.com. And I really hope that anyone watching, if you're curious, you want something to empower and inspire you to bring the truth to your friends and family and peers, please watch Frankenskies the movie at frankenskiesthemovie.com and empower yourself with some knowledge. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem. It was a totally interesting movie, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for being on Radio Wasteland. You've been listening to Matthew Landman. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and you were listening to our guest Matthew Landman. Are you upset I didn't start the show the way, or the segment the way?
Little bit.
Sean wanted me to clear my throat and go, ahem.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, I have my own desires about how the show should be run, but
totally.
It doesn't matter.
He keeps bringing it up at the meetings.
I'm the co-host. What do I know? Right?
And all the board members are just all like, "What?" So, I went into this thinking like that this was a topic we had to hit.
Oh, I agree, absolutely.
But I went into it with very much the same attitude that I went into Flat Earth with.
Yeah, me too.
Where I'm just all like, meh, this is not happening, but we're going to cover this topic.
I think he made more sense for me than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, and if you watch the movie and the timeline, it's really interesting because really what it shows me is that the technology is out there. Mm-hmm. And that it's something that we've studied,
sure.
Meaning,
oh, absolutely,
that we're probably doing this.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that chemtrails are, part of it? Does that mean this, that, and the other? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But are we doing something down the lines of this? I would say yes.
Yeah. So I'm coming into this with I took a couple of classes about climate change in college, and I'm actually. At least at the time, I was pretty well versed with the science. It's been a few years. It's pretty fuzzy now, but at the time, at least, I knew a lot more about it than I think most people do. You were an amateur
climatologist?
Basically, yeah.
Right.
I mean, they were rigorous courses, but obviously I didn't major in it or anything. But so I'm actually familiar with a lot of the programs and geoengineering initiatives he's talking about. And, yeah, he's true. It's all possible, certainly, and it's all being looked into. There's just, no real argument about that. I think where I would dispute it is, I don't know, he seems to tie it all much more into, a very organized, monolithic sort of conspiracy, that I'm just not sure I buy that. It would require almost total control of the media, and the media is at the government's throat all the time. The media is at each other's throat all the time. I have a hard time believing, the level of organization it would take. And he also seemed to imply that, like, the climate change we're seeing now is all sort of part of this. It's part of the result of past climate warfare, and that I think is just categorically wrong.
I was left with the impression that he felt that climate change was the fault of governments and not the fault of industry.
Yeah, so I can buy a lot of it. It's just that it's like you're talking about scale. You would need to fly more planes than we have on the planet to equal a fraction of what a coal-burning power plant spews out into the air. Mm-hmm. It's simple enough chemistry. It's just a matter of the numbers of what produces what and what goes into the air. Right. And so that part I'm just like, okay, no, that just can't be true.
Right.
Because I'm more familiar with it. However, when he's talking about, a lot of people want to blot out the sun, basically, that's true. That's an idea people have put forth for combating global warming, and it's very controversial.
Mr. Burns?
Mr. Burns?
Yeah. You didn't watch that episode of The Simpsons? Okay, so Mr. Burns in an episode of The Simpsons puts up a disc to block out the sun, like on a big arm. which was actually taken from a movie called Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Okay.
And they actually block out the sun, but physically block out the sun with a device.
Yeah. So anyway, I feel like I'm maybe monopolizing this a little bit, but I guess I would say, I don't know, I 50% agreed with the things he said.
Right. When he started to get into, I don't know, I do think that corporations have a huge amount of power and a huge amount of influence on governments, but I think when it comes to things like this, I find it hard to believe that it wouldn't be governments doing it.
Yeah.
And when we're dealing with a situation where Russians are influencing our elections and stuff like that, I think that there's probably warfare going on here because
I think climate warfare is very likely that that's happening.
When you bend the jet stream, you're affecting everybody else.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that you're just pulling down a little chunk for you over your part and nobody else is being disturbed by this. And, I don't know if you've seen much footage of Russia, but it's not pretty by any means there.
It's Russia.
Yeah.
They drink vodka for a reason.
Yeah. It looks like they could use some better weather. And, we got hit with a record number of hurricanes. And there was some talk about whether or not that was warfare. It kind of feels like governments would be doing this. I don't think that corporations could get away with doing this because governments could just easily stop them,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't know what else to add, but I think when he's talking about warfare and about the fact that this technology exists and that this fact that this technology is in pilot programs all over the world, that's just absolutely true.
So from your fancy liberal schooling, did the alphabet groups that he was talking about ring a bell to you?
As I was saying, I'd heard about most of those before, or at least the ideas of shoot. Okay, never mind. I can't remember the name of the one I'm talking about.
HAARP was the one where
not that one. It was SI something.
Oh, right. Yeah, the aerosol.
Yeah, that's the main one. That's been one of the main and most widely discussed ideas for stopping global warming. Now, as I said, it's really controversial. A lot of people don't really think it would work the way we think it would, or it wouldn't help enough, or maybe it would cause more problems. And how do we get everyone on board? And how do we make sure it's, how do we make sure it's done basically in a way that works for everyone and is not, unduly polluting some places more than others? There's a ton of issues with this thing.
We as a people are just so stupid. Just so stupid. It's like the things that we do to ourselves when we could just live simpler lives. So, maybe this is, maybe I'm correcting myself here. Maybe it is corporations and driving economies, because if we could just get people to live simpler lives, we wouldn't be dealing with any of this.
It's true. Fewer people, though, too.
Well, the Earth is not that overcrowded. We act
it's not
like
overcrowded, but
act
resources
like
are the problem.
Well, simpler lives means fewer resources.
True.
Go ahead, travel the world. But when you're not traveling the world, don't drive 2 hours for your job.
Yeah.
Create economies that are local. It's like
more people means more complexity is what I mean. Hard to have people living simple lives if there's, if you've got enough people, then eventually someone's going to rock the boat.
Yeah, I'm going to my hippie commune.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. When you come on back, because you are going to come on back, we got the news. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. This is Sean's News Hour. We need some beep, 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 beeps in the background. during the
I'm
news
not
segment?
going to be talking for an hour. However.
Well, internet hours, which are like 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. So there's trouble in paradise. And by paradise, I mean not...
Do you know something about my wife I don't know about?
Not paradise at all, I mean MUFON.
Oh.
Which, honestly, to a lot of people and us here, is in this, whole vein of topics we talk about, is an extremely well-respected and venerable organization.
Absolutely,
One of the premier pretty much the premier organization for the ufology in general.
For those who don't know, it's the Mutual UFO Network.
That's MUFON. Right. Yeah, so they have directors and centers all over the country.
Yeah, we had one on here, Dev Rooney.
Yes, we did.
One of our very first shows. One of our very first guests, at least.
Yes, we've had a number of ufologists on, and as you said, one at least was affiliated with MUFON. Many are not, but so a number of directors of different regions have been stepping down recently over a unfortunate controversy with a former director of sort of the Pennsylvania region who basically went on a racist tirade on social media about the Netflix show Dear White People. And so basically this kind of behavior is not exactly new from him, but that caught a lot of attention in the media, and essentially many people who were also involved in MUFON resigned in protest.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. What is Dear White People?
I really don't know, but according to this guy, it promotes white genocide.
White genocide?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a show just like progressively poking fun at white people.
Huh. Okay.
I don't know if I'd go genocide. I think that's maybe a little too far. I haven't watched it. I have no idea what it's about. However, this guy, the rant started there, and he ended up saying, look up IQ differences by race, and everything good that was ever invented came from Europe. Mic drop. Right. So, not great.
Right.
No.
So first off, this is a tough one to even touch with a 10-foot pole.
Sure.
So let's say IQ are different by race. I would argue with this guy that, we have systematically pushed a lot of these other minorities into situations where they don't get the the education and the advantages that the rest of us get. So that dude needs to shut up.
It's not actually true. Anyway,
I don't think
according
it's true.
to available IQ data,
I don't think it's true, but
discrepancies and
I'd
problems,
shut this dude down. I do find that as a white male myself, I do find that that there's definitely a lot more of that stuff coming my way than there used to be.
Sure.
And I do worry about human nature having nothing to do with race, that humans are generally kind of vengeful people. Vindictive. And so, I don't see why, it's like, I have this issue with men and women, that women became liberated. They got the vote. They got all this freedom that they didn't have before. And instead of men learning a lesson and becoming a little more like women so that we could all get along, women just kind of became like men, and now we're all jerks. And now everybody's a jerk, and they're all, well, they did it to me, well, we're doing it to them, and then other people are all, we're doing it this way, and blah, blah, blah. It's just going to go on forever.
Well, maybe
forever and ever, because people are just hateful, and it has nothing to do with your race or your gender. You just suck. Look in the mirror. I don't care what you look like. You probably suck.
Well, maybe just the nature of having agency and autonomy in your life is that you come across as a jerk.
I don't know. Was that an insult toward me? I didn't understand that sentence.
No. Well,
are you insulting me?
I'm saying men wouldn't have become more like women. I would say, women get the vote, women become liberated. Of course, they appear more like jerks. That's the very nature of having freedom, is that you become more annoying.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You know,
So,
I'm just saying that women over the years
was inevitable.
have picked up a lot of the negative qualities that men have had over the years. You know, and maybe they always had them. You know, and they had to repress them. You know, maybe I'm giving too much credit to this situation, and we all really are just that terrible.
See, that's kind of where I'm coming from, but I don't know. Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Who am I to say, right?
But I am a firm believer. Here's my stance on race, gender, sexuality, and all of those things.
Go.
We as a country made a pact that all men and women are created equal.
Okay.
And we're
I'm with
moving
you.
forward from this. Stop hitting me with studies. Stop hitting me with attitudes of this, that, and the other, and look what these people can do, and look at that, and look at this. We already made the decision that we're moving forward, and we're all equals. Knock that crap off. Let's get to work.
Amen.
Amen. You know, and I realize, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the people who need us to stand up for them, we don't go and we stand up for them. I'm not saying to ignore that. I'm saying go stand up for them. Let's get us all up. If you see somebody knocked down, even if you have to get socked in the face, you bend down and you help pick them up, because that's what we decided on as a country. And that's who we are. And, you know, people just need to knock this crap off. It's like ridiculous. And people have gotten like to the point where you know, black people are more.
I think that's what Martin Luther King Jr. said.
Yeah.
People need to knock this crap off. It's ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. You know, black people are more apt to get sickle cell anemia. And so it was like on the news the other day, and they're just all, well, because of this, should we be testing black people for sickle cell anemia more often than white people? And I'm like watching this thing going, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That seems like that would follow,
if you
right?
want to save their lives, you know, we're not playing PC with your health. You know, we want these people to live. You know, what a stupid, oh, God, just absolutely ridiculous. You know, because if I was black, I'd be, have you tested me for sickle cell anemia? What are they going to say? Oh, we didn't want to offend you. And it's like, you're not offending me. You're keeping me alive. You need to get to work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous, you know, how much people have gotten into it. But I mean, I do understand, because, you know, I tiptoe my way through this stuff, you know. I was raised in a small town, and this gender stuff was very new to me, and I didn't really understand any of it. And, you know, it really kind of took my kids sort of like saying, you know, you don't have to understand it, really kind of calling me out on my lack of understanding. And it really brought me to my attitude of that we're Americans and we all agreed on this stuff. And that is that a transgender person or a black person or any other type of person, I don't have to understand what it's like to be like them. All I have to understand is that they're not hurting anybody by being the way that they are. And therefore, as an American, I need to support that. That's the bottom line. I can't understand what every single person on this planet is feeling or what their life has been like. But I can understand that their life is their own and that they're not hurting anybody. And so I need to mind my own freaking business unless they need some help. I don't know. Hopefully I didn't back myself into some sort of stupid white guy corner with my rant there.
I don't know. That made sense to me.
All right. Well,
anyway, MUFON had some trouble with this.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I went on a rant.
Oh, that doesn't matter. I think we pretty much covered it. But, you know, we're all tiptoeing.
Yeah, so now these other MUFON guys are backing out, because I think I caught some of this. The guy had been kicked down, said he can't be a director anymore because you're a weird racist dude. But then they brought him back to sort of like head some...
Exactly. So a bunch of directors found out, hey, this guy still is very much involved on these different levels of operation. He's basically still director in all but name, and he's putting together this whole event for this particular branch of MUFON. So basically what MUFON's getting in trouble for is sweeping this guy under the rug, essentially. They said, oh, you know, he's racist, we don't want any part of that, we're shuffling him out of here, but they didn't. Right. And so a bunch of people resigned in protest. And And now the whole situation is all over the news. This has been, national news, not just in fringe circles.
Right. Well, if the media is really trying to knock down belief in the UFO system, this is probably good ammo.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because, we had a MUFON guy on. He was great.
Yeah.
MUFON's a good organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these people are all over. And on top of that, people are saying things that they don't really realize because they're coming out of this world where these things weren't a problem.
Yeah.
At least not in their world. It wasn't a problem. And now those worlds are clashing. And now we're having people say things and really.
Yeah.
Whoops.
I mean, this guy's rant was pretty ugly, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Reading it, like, yeah, that seems pretty easy to avoid saying or even thinking those things.
Right. But do you think that old white guys should get a one my bad card where they do something and then they can turn in the my bad card like once and like that's how you get to learn your lesson?
I don't know. It depends though, right? Because it's like
how bad are we talking?
Right. It's that because I mean, if it's to the point where you're like, all I did was burn a cross on a lawn one time and everyone's upset.
Yeah, that's a lot of effort.
You don't do that.
Right.
It's easy to not do that.
Yeah, let me explain this. You can use the my bad card for building the cross or for loading it in the truck, but doing all of it,
right?
That's a couple of bads. You're right. Well, luckily I had 7 friends with
me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you should get a my bad card. You should get a lot of my bad cards for just like slip-ups of the tongue or whatever. Heck, dealing with like gender terminology for all that kind of thing.
Oh, well,
that's,
I mean,
so no one cares. Just as long as you're trying.
Pronouns are different because
that's fine.
It's like my daughter wants me to stop knocking when I come in her room during the day, and I'm just all I have been ingrained with politely knocking on a door when it's closed, especially when it belongs to a girl that lives in my house and it's her own room.
Yeah.
I don't think I could get rid of that. It's going to take some serious time.
Right. That kind of thing is just
right.
That's you've got to be understanding. Yeah. That's just the way it is.
If racism and hate is so ingrained in you that it's going to take some time to get rid of it, you might want to sign yourself up for something. Like the Betty Ford Racist Clinic or something. 12 steps to not being a jerk face. All right, you're listening to Radio Wasteland. Thanks for checking us out. Check us out next week.